Mayor Daley is unveiling the city's new gun ordinance. This is Chicago's newest move to try to control gun purchases after a U.S. Supreme Court decision made the city's ban on owning guns unenforceable. Good evening. I'm Alan Kraszewski.
And I'm Sylvia Perez. Ron and Cheryl are off this evening. The City Council's Police and Fire Committee quickly approved the new gun ordinance. It goes before the full council tomorrow. So what's included in this new ordinance, and do Chicagoans think it will really help stop the violence? ABC 7's Evelyn Holmes joins us with more on that. Evelyn?
Sophia and Alan, it really depends on who you ask, depending on what opinion you're going to get. That answer to that question really depends on what you think, kind of what your experience has been, what you've been reading about. Many of those, though, who do support Mayor Daley's newest gun ban say they prefer all-out prohibition of handguns in Chicago, but add some type of ban is better than nothing at all. Meanwhile, gun rights advocates say the latest gun control proposal is still pretty restrictive and argue that it unfairly targets legal gun owners and not the gangs and offenders who are responsible for the violence. It's on blocks like this in Chicago's Inglewood neighborhood where residents doubt the city's newest handgun ban proposal can do much to stop the violence that claims too many victims.
Ban the guns, period. I'm tired of seeing these kids getting shot.
Supported by other city officials and community leaders, Mayor Richard Daley unveiled his new gun control ordinance.
Too many people can easily obtain guns in America. It's the most easy thing to get in America. It's harder to get a car license.
It's called the Responsible Gun Ownership Ordinance and allows only one operable firearm per household. That owners must have a city firearms permit and a valid FOID card, and that weapons be registered with the Chicago Police Department. The City Council's Police and Fire Committee passed the scaled-down version of the measure this afternoon, and that, unlike the original plan of allowing only one gun per adult in a home, it limits registration to one handgun a month in order to better withstand any legal challenges.
We applied the one gun per month approach, and that is an approach that has been upheld in Washington, D.C.
The new proposal comes in quick response to replace Chicago's existing handgun ban, essentially rendered unenforceable by the U.S. Supreme Court this week. Supporters say they're not encouraging the public to buy guns.
Having a gun that day when my son was killed wouldn't have saved his life. Not having guns on the street would have saved my son's life.
The ordinance bans assault weapons and gun shops. It also creates a gun offender registry. Richard Pearson, the executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association, says his organization plans on reviewing today's proposal that he says doesn't really address the issue of illegal handgun possession.
We'll be going forward and trying to do everything we can do to get the problem solved so that citizens of Chicago can defend themselves.
But for Sylvia Duncan and Khadijah Smith, the aspiring teen musicians she mentors, some kind of ban is better than nothing.
It's going to stop a lot of dreams, and kids that are already faithless and hopeless, it's going to create more hopelessness in the community.
The gun control measure also requires guns kept in homes with minors under the age of 18 to be secured with trigger locks and also in lock boxes. Prospective gun owners will face a mandatory minimum of 4 hours of classroom training and 1 hour of firing range training before getting a permit. Penalties for violating the proposed ordinance include fines anywhere from $1,000 to $5,000 and jail time from 20 days up to 6 months. Now, aldermen plan to vote on this issue tomorrow during a special session of the City Council, and if that passes, this will go into effect in roughly 10 days.
And it's expected to pass?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thanks.
All right, Evelyn, thank you. Now,
a special session of the Chicago City Council has approved a new gun law for Chicago, but gun rights advocates are already promising to challenge the new law in court. Good evening, everyone. Kathy and Alan have today off. Mayor Daley called for the new law after a ruling by the United States Supreme Court signaled the end of the city's 28-year-old ban on handguns.
ABC 7 political reporter Charles Thomas is here with more. Charles?
Sylvia, Ravi, legal handguns in Chicago will be allowed only inside the owner's residential building, not in the yard or any outbuildings. You'll have to pay to register the weapon and undergo training to use it. That's the basis of Mayor Daley's revised gun control effort, approved unanimously today by the City Council.
The mayor was in no mood for dissent. Watch what happened when Alderman Bob Fioretti suggested a new ordinance was necessary in part because the outlawed gun ban had not worked.
The question is, why are we here today?
We're here because of the Supreme Court.
What?
That's why we are here.
Okay.
The reason why we are here, we're here because of the Supreme Court decision that was rendered
against the city of Chicago gun ban.
Okay, thank you for your clarification, but
with the mayor's position clear, the other alderman who spoke praised the administration's reworked attempt at handgun control.
I pray that our families will go out and get the proper protections and the proper training so that we don't have to see senseless deaths in our homes.
Chicago's new handgun ordinance, to become effective on July 12th, requires training in the classroom and firing range before residents may apply for a city firearm permit that will cost $125 to obtain. Only one gun a month per adult may be registered, and owners must have no violent crime or DUI convictions in their history. The city's top lawyer says failure to register a gun within 90 days after July 12th could result in punishment.
It's a $1,000 to $5,000 fine and potentially 20 to 90 days in jail.
There are a lot of regulations here. I figure a lawsuit is going to be filed next week.
Colleen and David Lawson, two of the plaintiffs in the Supreme Court case that overturned the city's gun ban, are convinced the federal appeals court will soften the new ordinance and perhaps allow firing ranges in Chicago.
You can't just buy a firearm and be safe. You have to know how to use that firearm.
The city dropped a proposal to require insurance for legal handguns when it determined the policy would cost so much as to make gun possession unconstitutionally too expensive for most people.
You don't want to put another burden upon someone, who's going to have, the right to have a gun in their home.
To apply for a city permit, you'll need a state firearm owner's identification card. You'll also be fingerprinted by the Chicago Police Department. Robbie Sylvia, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals will decide later this summer if these rules interfere with the Second Amendment, which guarantees, the court said earlier this week, the right to have a gun in your home for protection.
All right, very specific. All right, Charles. Thanks a lot.
A legal challenge of Chicago's law banning handguns goes before the U.S. Supreme Court tomorrow. It is an important case not only for Chicago, but for the entire country. Good evening, everyone. The final ruling by the court may help determine what kind of gun laws can be passed by cities.
Today, Mayor Daley is defending Chicago's ban on handguns, and he's saying that he hopes that the court will rule in the city's favor. Here's ABC 7's Paul Meinke.
Chicago's handgun ban, now 28 years old, was very similar to the ban in Washington, D.C. that was struck down by the Supreme Court 20 months ago. But the nation's capital is a federal enclave, and that Second Amendment ruling is focused on federal law. The question is, will the High Court extend the ruling to Chicago and other cities?
Many people believe that this is not an area where the Supreme Court should be looking over the shoulders of the states and local subdivisions.
That's the Chicago position, that local governments have long had the right to establish their own gun laws, and that the D.C. case ought not apply. The Supreme Court in the Washington, D.C. case said that Second Amendment rights are not unlimited, but minimally, residents of Washington, D.C. ought to have the right to have a gun in their own homes to protect themselves. That's what Otis McDonald wants. He is the lead plaintiff in the case challenging Chicago's gun ban.
I have to do what I have to do. And I'm not going to take on something that is wrong, that I think is going to be detrimental to anybody.
If the high courts strike down this ban, then we will literally become a city under the gun.
Today, Chicago clergymen, 4 congressmen, aldermen, and families of gun violence joined to argue that an end to Chicago's handgun ban will inescapably lead to more gun violence.
People have differences of opinion in rural areas, yes, and hunters and all that. We're not talking about taking guns away. We're talking about reasonable gun legislation, and that's what this is.
The Supreme Court will now decide whether the Second Amendment can be applied to the states, and if it does, it will then decide whether Chicago's handgun ban passes constitutional muster. Although he supports the right of local governments to write their own gun laws, constitutional scholar Jeffrey Shaman thinks Chicago's handgun ban may not survive.
So Chicago just have to enact as many gun regulations as possible short of banning the possession of handguns.
The mayor today would not detail any fallback positions, saying that the city's argument is strong and will go forward. Paul Meinke, ABC 7 News.
Paul is going to be in Washington tomorrow to cover the gun case when it goes before the Supreme Court, and we're going to have live reports beginning on ABC 7 News at 4 o'clock.
This morning, Chicago is on one side of a Supreme Court showdown over handguns. The justices are asked to decide whether the Constitution's Second Amendment applies to local gun laws. Attorney Thomas Glassico returns here this morning to help us understand this case that's before the High Court and what will happen today. The hearings will happen at 9 o'clock this morning. Good morning, Thomas.
Good morning.
Always good to have you here.
Good to see you.
So give us a quick breakdown of this case. What is the city of Chicago saying? What's the argument on the other side?
City of Chicago is saying because the Second Amendment only applies to the federal government under the Bill of Rights, under selective inclusion, that it shouldn't apply to states and it shouldn't apply to municipalities. So therefore, the Heller decision, the decision in 2008 that was the Washington, D.C. case that struck down the Washington, D.C. handgun ban, should not apply to the city of Chicago because the Second Amendment simply doesn't apply to states. It only applies to the federal government. That's their argument.
And Mr. McDonald on the other side says
that this has been ruled a fundamental right under Heller, and because it's a fundamental right, the Supreme Court should include the amendment in its 14th Amendment, which is where all the Bill of Rights have been applied to the states, and therefore it should be struck down.
Now, you mentioned the Heller decision, which was the Washington, D.C. case. So if it already ruled, overturned a ban on Washington, D.C., how is Chicago different?
Chicago is different because Washington, D.C. is a federal enclave. It is ruled by the federal government. There are no state powers there. And the Bill of Rights, the amendments that we know of as the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, etc., originally only applied to the federal government. It was only applied to the states through the 14th Amendment after the Civil War, and only selective amendments have been applied to the states. What McDonald is asking is to apply all those amendments to the states and strike down previous rulings that only gave selective inclusion to the amendments.
How did this case end up before the High Court?
It ended up before the Supreme Court because once the Heller decision was decided, Chicago and various other places in the area had handgun bans. The people who are gun proponents said, hey, this is unconstitutional. It's been ruled unconstitutional in Heller. Now's our time to strike. 137 years of erosion of gun rights really are beginning to be reversed, so we should go forward with it. Illinois and Wisconsin are the only two states left in the Union that don't have any kind of a handgun or concealed weapon statute. Almost every other state in the Union has some type of concealed weapon ban.
And what do you think is going to happen today?
What's probably going to happen with the arguments, there's going to be very spirited arguments on both sides. The justices are going to be asking very pointed questions to both the proponents and the opponents of this rule, and they are then going to take into consideration what they are going to do. They will retire, and several months from now we will come out with a decision that is either following Heller and expanding those rights or curtailing them under some form of keeping the ban in place.
So the decision won't come for several months, you said?
Probably not.
Thomas, thank you so much for coming in today.
It's nice to see you.
The United States Supreme Court may be ready to strike down Chicago's law that bans handguns. Arguments on both sides were presented to the nation's highest court today in Washington, and the final ruling will affect gun laws across the nation. ABC 7's Paul Mikes live in Washington with more on the arguments today. Paul?
Alan, it's clear the Supreme Court is deeply divided on this issue. It was deeply divided 20 months ago when it overturned Washington, D.C.'s handgun ban on a 5-4 vote. And based on some of the questions from the justices today, it appears as though Chicago's handgun ban could go the same way.
It's clear to me that this case is going to be tough for the city of Chicago.
Even some gun control advocates think Chicago's nearly 3-decade-long ban on handguns may be about to fall. And from their comments today, it seems at least 5 of the justices see a right to bear arms with restrictions as national in scope, built around the individual and not the collective rights of a state militia.
We're looking for some balance, we're looking for some flexibility, and we're looking for choice. And we think the choice should remain with state and local governments.
Chicago argues that its handgun ban is based on over 200 years of law, that the Second Amendment is applied to federal law, and that the states and cities need the ability to draft gun laws based on local public health and safety concerns.
How can you even imagine that law-abiding elderly people like myself is going to be a danger to society?
Retired maintenance engineer Otis McDonald from Morgan Park is the lead plaintiff in the case to overturn Chicago's handgun ban. He was in court today and heard several justices, including Anthony Kennedy, suggest in their questioning that the right to bear firearms is sufficiently fundamental, much like the First Amendment.
I have every confidence that the Supreme Court is going to rule that this is a freedom for all the American people, not just those living in federal enclaves.
Still, when the court threw out the Washington, D.C. handgun ban 2 years ago, it did so saying that handguns ought to be available for a homeowner's self-defense. Most believe that when the court decides McDonald versus the city of Chicago, there will be restrictions.
I think once the court makes it clear that the core of the Second Amendment is just that gun in the home for self-defense, that anything else beyond gun in the home for self-defense is something that states and cities can regulate, then I think we will continue to have reasonable restrictions, and I think we'll be able to continue to do things to make our cities safer.
The D.C. case was a landmark decision. Chicago's case poses even more vexing constitutional questions. The court will render its decision most probably sometime in June. Outside the Supreme Court, Paul Meinke, ABC 7 News. Kathy?
Okay, Paul, thanks.
Chicago's new gun control ordinance goes into effect tomorrow. It prohibits gun owners from stepping outside their homes with a handgun and bans gun shops in Chicago. Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Jordan.
And I'm Ravi Bajwal. Gun advocates have already launched a legal battle against the new law. And ABC 7's Sarah Schulte here now with the latest on the debate. Sarah?
Ravi and Karen, the new ordinance hasn't even gone into effect, yet 2 lawsuits were filed last week. One from 4 Chicago residents who want to carry their handguns outside their home, and another from a gun shop owner who wants to open a store in Lincoln Park. The city admits Chicago's ordinance goes further than any other city in the country. Gun shops are busy and starting tomorrow are likely to get even busier. Chicago's new gun ordinance will require training in a classroom and on the firing range.
There's just a lot of curiosity over what they have to learn, the cost and all that.
The phones have been ringing off the hook at Elmwood Park's Illinois Gun Works ever since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Chicago's gun ban and ever since Chicago's City Council fired back with an ordinance restricting the use of a handgun. Some gun owners who take the Second Amendment very seriously say any type of restriction is a violation of their rights. And they argue limiting the use does not curb violence.
The criminals are always going to get guns, even if they try and take the guns away from us.
Besides training, the new ordinance bans gun sales in the city, limits permit holders to 1 operable handgun in a home, prohibits guns in garages, porches, and yards, and allows the purchase of 1 handgun a month. Several of these provisions have already been challenged. Some experts say Chicago is legally pushing the envelope.
Registration, I think, will be upheld. Training requirements are likely to be upheld. But there have been no settled judicial opinions about 1 operable gun per household, about not having a gun in an attached garage, about not having any kind of gun stores within the jurisdictions.
And with lawsuits in the works, the Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence is confident several of the new provisions will be upheld in the courts.
What the City Council is trying to do is try and minimize the risk that handguns will pose to people in Chicago while respecting the rights of individuals who want to have a handgun in their home for self-defense.
The new gun ordinance may be controversial among gun owners. It was not with Chicago's aldermen. The council passed the ordinance by a vote of 45-0. And while the U.S. Supreme Court said citizens have a right to keep firearms at home, the court did not establish any standards for gun restrictions. So experts say a lot of these lawsuits are going to be going through the lower courts. Eventually, they probably will make their way to the U.S. Supreme Court. So a lot of untested ground here.
A lot of court time to come.
You bet.
All right. Thanks so much. Handguns are no longer banned in Chicago, but today a tough new law went into effect of putting strict limits on gun ownership in the city. Chicago residents now limited to the number of guns that they can have in their homes.
The Chicago handgun law is the strictest in the country, and it was approved by the City Council after the U.S. Supreme Court knocked down Chicago's handgun ban last month. ABC 7's Sarah Schulte is joining us now with more on the new handgun law. Sarah.
Karen and Ravi, it is a law that requires gun owners to go through a lengthy procedure before legally having a handgun in a home. A valid firearm owner's identification card, known as FOID, issued by the state is just one of the requirements residents will need in order to apply for a Chicago firearms permit. 1 hour on the range and 4 hours of training in the classroom is just part of the process to legally carry a handgun in Chicago.
The worst thing in the world is to buy a gun, load it, and stick it under your pillow and not know how it works.
Don Mastriani is the owner of Illinois Gun Works in Elmwood Park. Ever since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Chicago's gun ban, Mastriani has received hundreds of calls, emails, and walk-ins from potential gun buyers who are curious about Chicago's new gun ordinance. But before running out and buying a gun, there is a long process.
The process involves 2 steps. Beginning with the application for a Chicago firearms permit. We'll call it the CFP. The CFP is required in order to legally register a firearm.
The permit must be submitted in person at Chicago Police Headquarters, and once you get one, which could take several days, you have 5 days to register your handgun. But that does not mean you can carry your gun outside your home in Chicago.
It is still illegal to possess a firearm on the streets of Chicago, which includes bringing it to the Chicago Police Department headquarters to register. Do not bring your weapons to Chicago Police Department headquarters to register them.
Only one handgun can be registered in a 30-day period, and the ordinance calls for an owner to only have one operable handgun inside the home. For gun owner Denise Byers, she is thrilled Chicagoans can now legally carry handguns, even with the restrictions.
I grew up in the city of Chicago, and I saw all the murders and the deaths, and I didn't feel comfortable in the city without some way of protecting myself.
And using a handgun for self-defense is exactly what the new city ordinance is designed for. It is illegal to have a gun in the garage, on the front porch, or a yard, and a gun must be broken down if you want to transport it. As of this afternoon, close to 100 people have walked into police headquarters asking for a permit application. Of course, for more information on the ordinance and the process, go to our website, abc7chicago.com. We'll link you up with the Chicago Police website, and that is the key. You have to download an application. Then go in person, and you have to have a lot, a valid driver's license, 2 passport photos, all sorts of stuff, and then the police have to process it.
Very quickly, what's the buzz here about this new law actually being challenged in court?
Well, it's already been challenged in court. As of, last week, I think 2 lawsuits have already been filed. One from a gun shop owner in the suburbs who wants to open one up here, because that's part of the ordinance, too, is that you cannot sell guns in the city of Chicago. So it will be, and there's also, controversy from, lawyers say there's probably parts of this ordinance that will probably not be held up.
Right.
Fair enough.
All right. A lot of more court time for this.
You bet.
Right. Thank you, Sarah.
Owning a handgun in Chicago is no longer illegal. Tonight, a new gun ordinance is in place, meaning those wanting to pack heat legally are going to have to abide by some of the toughest gun regulations in the country. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Brock.
And I'm Ravi Baichwal. Alan Krzyzewski is off tonight, and Chicago's ban on handguns has been replaced by mandates over who can own a gun, how many, and how much training they should receive. ABC 7's Sarah Schulte here now with more on the law as it goes into effect. Sarah?
Ravi and Kathy, if you're interested in owning a handgun in Chicago, don't expect to get one overnight. The procedure involves 2 steps. It begins with applying in person at Chicago Police Headquarters for a Chicago gun permit. Applicants must be fingerprinted and submit to a background check. The second part of the process is registering a gun. The right to bear arms is very important to Denise Byers. This River Grove resident grew up in a violent neighborhood in Chicago, but fled to the suburbs because of Chicago's gun ban.
I grew up in the city of Chicago, and I saw all the murders and the deaths, and I didn't feel comfortable in the city without some way of protecting myself, so I moved to the suburbs where I could protect myself.
Byers is thrilled the ban has been lifted, even if it means the enactment of the toughest handgun restrictions in the country. Chicago's new ordinance is designed for gun owners to protect themselves in their own home. It remains illegal to transport a gun, even in some sections of your own property.
It doesn't include the garage, doesn't include the front porch, the back porch, doesn't include anything, other than the actual walls or the confines within the home.
A Chicago gun permit is required before registering a handgun. To apply, applicants must have a valid FOID card, must be 21 years of age, pay a $100 fee, and what some say is the most important part of the process, training. 4 hours in a classroom and 1 hour on the range is required.
The worst thing in the world is to buy a gun, load it, and stick it under your pillow and not know how it works.
Elmwood Park's Illinois Gunworks has been pushing training for years, and training classes for Chicagoans anxious to own a gun will begin here at the Fidelity Investigative Training Academy on Saturday.
We've gotten a lot of interest both from the city, but then also from the suburbs.
The city says the long process for a permit and registering a gun is all about safety.
Our key thing is we want to know who has weapons so that first responders can be aware of that information before they have to enter that home.
New law only allows a gun owner to keep one working gun in a home. Also, only one handgun can be registered in a 30-day period. In addition, the ordinance does not allow the sale of handguns in Chicago. The ordinance is already facing legal challenges. And, of course, for more information on the ordinance, go ahead to our website, abc7chicago.com, and we'll link you to the Chicago Police Department website to get all the details on how to do this.
Okay, so you live in Chicago, you buy a handgun in the suburbs, you want to transport it back into the city, but you aren't allowed to carry it assembled. What do? You
got to disassemble it. You got to leave the gun store having it disassembled and
have to know how to put it back together
right,
when you get
at home.
And if you want to transport it again to take it someplace, you have to break it down. Okay. Thanks, Sarah.
Now, today's ruling seen as a victory for gun rights advocates like the Illinois State Rifle Association, which held a news conference shortly after the Supreme Court's decision. ABC 7's Jose Sanders is live in the loop with more on that. Jose?
Well, Sylvia, we heard today words like elated and gratified as a reaction to the Supreme Court's decision. We're here today with members of the Illinois Rifle Association and several plaintiffs of the so-called McDonald case here at the Allegro. For years now, they have been fighting the Chicago handgun ban, and they view this ruling as a victory for individual rights. They do acknowledge that the closeness of that 5-4 decision and the city's vow to rework handgun ordinances both mean this isn't really over. They say Chicago simply overstepped its bounds and ignored the Constitution. However, this group says it is a good day for ordinary citizens who simply want to protect themselves.
I'm looking forward very much to being able to protect my children with a handgun, which will allow me to call 911 with the other hand.
I think we spend too much time catering to the criminal element and not enough time working with the law-abiding citizens.
What I would like to suggest to the mayor, though, is he take those millions of dollars that he spent in litigation or continues to spend in litigation, use that to improve his educational system in the city of Chicago.
We're going to be looking at whatever the city passes on an individual basis, and if we feel it does not meet a compelling government interest and it's not the least restrictive means to further whatever that interest is, we'll be challenging it in court.
Again, no jumping for joy here. They expect, of course, more court battles once the city of Chicago regroups and decides what its next move will be. We're live in the loop today. Jose Sanders, ABC 7 News. Sylvia, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Jose.
With me is Mara George, the Corporation Counsel, Annette Holt, Purpose Over Pain, Tom Bosley, Purpose Over Pain, Sarita Varela, Purpose Over Pain, Jody Weiss, Superintendent of Chicago Police, and Ron Holt. Today, in a 5-4 decision, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment of the Constitution applies to states and local government as well as the federal government. I'm disappointed by the decision, but it's not surprising. However, the Supreme Court did not strike down any part of our ordinance. The court reversed the lower court decision upholding our handgun ban, but remanded the case to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals for further proceedings. Technically, this means that our current ordinance, which does not allow the registration and consequently the ownership of handguns, is still in effect until the Seventh Court invalidates it. However, as a practical matter, it is clear that such a provision will ultimately be struck down based on the Supreme Court decision in the Heller case, in which the court ruled that the Washington, D.C. handgun ban violated the Second Amendment. We're still reviewing the entire decision, but it means that Chicago's current handgun ban is unenforceable. So we're working to rewrite our ordinance in a reasonable and responsible way to protect Second Amendment rights, protect Chicagoans from gun violence. We'll publicly propose a new ordinance very soon. Before then, I want to address my deep concern about some language in the Supreme Court decision today. To suggest that Chicago's elected officials haven't done enough to protect our city residents show that many of our highest levels officials don't understand that gun violence pervades America and not just Chicago. Across the country, cities are struggling with how to address the issue. Common sense tells you we need fewer guns on the street, not more guns. No one keeps statistics on the number of lives saved by the existence of a gun ban. For every person who uses a gun in self-defense, there are many more innocent bystanders who are killed by guns, more children taken from us, more people killed over trivial things like card games or disputes, personal disputes between neighbors. When it comes to Chicago, the court has ignored all that's been done over the last decade to dramatically lower homicide and violent crime rates. They ignored that thousands of people from every community and every background have joined their elected officials and ministers in marches to protect our children, to end the gun violence. They don't reflect the hard work and the sacrifice and loss of life of members of the Chicago Police Department that have constantly worked to create new strategies in our most challenging communities to end gun violence. And also the number of seizures that Chicago Police have done over many, many years in the collection of guns and destruction of guns over 30, 40 years here in the city of Chicago. Also did not reflect the loss of life and those that are injured in the course of their duties. They did not reflect also in this recently honoring police officer day, over 50 or 60% had some form of gun placed in their head close to them during the commission of a crime. This is one reason why homicides and violent crimes have dramatically reduced over the last decade. I know it doesn't feel that way, because one child killed is one too many. At the same time, and this is just as important, they don't seem to appreciate the full scope of gun violence in America. That will continue until we understand that there are reasonable, I say reasonable and responsible steps we can take as a nation to help end the needless gun violence and harm that irresponsible people bring on our friends and our family and our loved ones. Let us remind you about some of the facts about gun violence in America, which the Supreme Court did not mention. The numbers are alarming and help explain my passion about ending gun violence. An average in 1 year, more than 100,000 people in America are shot or killed with a gun. Each day in America, more than 80 people die from guns, and another 200 are wounded. Over 1 million people have been killed with guns in the United States since 1968, when Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy were assassinated. Every year in the United States, more than 3,000 children and teens are killed by guns. Maybe this gun violence happens because the United States remains one of the last few industrial countries that place so few restrictions on gun sales. Remember, America purchased more than $10 billion worth of guns and ammunition a year in America. There are now more than 270 privately owned firearms in our country, the equivalent of 9 firearms for every 10 men, women, and children. Further, the latest data from the United States Center for Disease Control and Prevention shows that well over 3,000 children and teens died from gunfire in the United States in 2006, a 6% increase over 2005. The number of children and teens killed in America killed by guns in 2006 would fill more than 127 public schools, classrooms of 25 each. More preschoolers were killed by firearms than law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. Estimated 41% of gun-related homicides and 94% of gun-related suicides would not have occurred under the same circumstances had no guns been present. The impact of this violence, mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, children and friends, killed or injured by guns, homes broken apart, dreams ended. All of it is needless. Gun violence also impacts society in countless other ways. Medical costs, costs to the criminal justice system, security protections such as metal detectors, reductions in quality of life because of permanent injuries caused by guns, and the fear of guns of violence, psychiatric damage to victims. These impacts are estimated to cost United States citizens $100 billion annually. It's understandable that most Americans, including gun owners, support reasonable gun laws. And that is why I want to remind the people of Chicago to know that even as we write Chicago's handgun ordinance, we will continue to pursue every avenue that reduces the chance of violence involving a handgun or any other weapon in Chicago or across the nation. As a city, we must continue to stand up to the gun and drug thugs who only want to terrorize our communities and harm our people. That includes going to Washington again to work for the ban on assault weapons to be reenacted. It includes pursuing a crackdown on gun shops and their owners at the federal and state level, if needed. We'll also look for new ways to challenge gun manufacturers, including how they market to our younger people. We'll continue our efforts to close a gun shop loophole in Washington, D.C. Further, we'll work even harder to make sure that only responsible adults can have access to guns across the nation. And that's a question. Giving determination what a responsible adult is. At every level of government, we work to get tougher about illegal gun trafficking, which is present all over America, and no one's doing anything about it. In closing, I want to say to the people of Chicago, the safety of our neighborhoods and our people, and on behalf of those who have lost their loved ones and friends to gun violence, we will never give in to those who use guns to harm others. Your fight is my fight, and we're in this together. Thank you.
Today, in a landmark 5-4 decision, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the Second Amendment of the Constitution applies to state and local governments as well as the federal government. The decision reverses 130 years of case law. The question, though, that everyone is asking, what does this mean for the city of Chicago? First, it's important to note that the Supreme Court did not expressly strike down any part of Chicago's ordinance. The court reversed the lower court decision upholding our handgun ban, but remanded the case to the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals for further proceedings. Technically, this means that our current ordinance, which does not allow the registration and consequently the ownership of handguns within the city of Chicago, is still in effect until the Seventh Circuit invalidates it. However, as a practical matter, it is clear from the decision that such a provision will ultimately be struck down, based upon primarily the Supreme Court's decision in the Heller case, in which the court ruled that Washington, D.C.'s handgun ban violated the Second Amendment. Therefore, we are in the process of drafting a new ordinance to promote safe and responsible gun ownership that complies with the court's ruling in this case. The proposed regulations will be introduced to the City Council on an expedited basis for consideration. In the meantime, though, it is important that Chicago residents understand that the case before the Supreme Court involved only the ban on the ownership of handguns in the home for self-defense purposes. There are still a number of other regulations regarding gun ownership and possession that remain in place in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois and are not affected by the court's decision in this case. For example, it is still illegal, 1, to carry a concealed weapon anywhere in the state of Illinois. 2, to possess a gun within the city of Chicago without first obtaining a firearm owner's identification card from the state. 3, to possess a gun in the city of Chicago that is not registered with the Chicago Police Department. 4, to transport any kind of gun in a vehicle in Chicago if the gun is not broken down into a non-functioning state. And 5, to possess a semi-automatic or automatic assault weapon, laser sight accessories, fragmenting bullets, and silencers. In most cases, gun owners must keep their guns unloaded and disassembled or bound by a trigger lock or similar device unless the firearm is in the registrant's possession at his place of residence or business or while being used for lawful recreational purposes within the city of Chicago. Violation of any of these laws can result in serious criminal and financial penalties, including impoundment of vehicles, fines, and jail time. I would urge anyone considering buying a gun at this time to wait until the new regulatory structure is in place and then carefully review all applicable laws before making any firearms purchases. Thank you.
Next.
Good afternoon. My name is Annette Nance Holt, mother of Blair Holt, who was murdered in May of 2007 on a CTA bus coming home from school when he shielded a friend. 5 students were shot that day, only 1 died. This easy access to guns, you know, this is a slap in the face to parents, those of us who have lost our children to gun violence. For the Supreme Court to answer, the answer is just to let us have more guns in a society that really can't handle the guns that are there now in place, and to allow guns to flood our communities. The communities that are going to be affected by this are black and brown communities. These are only communities that I know of right now that continue to suffer from the ravages of gun violence every day. Every day. And these stories don't make the news. These are stories I live every day as I work and I hear on the radio and on the TV, and those that don't get reported. So to put more guns into the hands, I mean, my question is to the Supreme Court is, you know, and to the federal government, what do we really need? We really need more money here in the city of Chicago, more funds so that we can hire more police officers to do what the law says that it needs to do, protect us. We don't have a militia. The militia is a police department. Those are the ones that will protect the citizens of Chicago. More police will make it safer for us in the city, and they can be put in places where we have more crime. We need more money for better education in communities, black and brown communities, and better schools, more jobs in blighted communities. Why can't we rule on some things like that? Parents be held accountable for their children and the actions that they have. The American Civil Liberties Union right now defends a lot of these actions that the kids commit. We can put a stop to that. People who are not afraid to speak up and take back our communities, that's what we need. Guns are not going to solve this problem. Other places that have guns, like D.C., when they lifted the ban in D.C., crime didn't get any better. It didn't get any better. In order to have a gun in your home and for a criminal to come in, you would have to have it in your hand at that time to get it anyway. And it should be secured so no one else would hurt themselves. So some of these things, they just don't make sense to me. I'm really beginning to wonder if anybody else cares about our children except for us. You know, the other things that we have with guns in hands of people who don't deserve them, we have accidental killings of children, each other. You have suicide. Suicide is on the rise because of guns. You have anger issues. So if we give people guns, when they get angry, when they lose their jobs, are they going to come out and shoot somebody? We have people with dementia, senior citizens who have guns and who have had guns for a while. When they tend to deteriorate in memory and everything else, those guns become something different to them. Someone could be hurt, a first responder, a police officer. And also, we have domestic abuse. With domestic abuse, guns in the hands of people, when they become angry, they're going to pick them up. That's the first thing they're going to turn to. No one knows how people are going to react when they get angry, because it's happening a lot. And we have people with psychological issues that are undiagnosed every day. They'll be able to get guns. Who's going to screen those people? So there are a lot of things. Crime just wouldn't exist, I don't think, if we wouldn't allow it to exist. That's the main problem. We allow it to exist in our cities. You see, the answer is really not more guns. More guns equals, to me, more problems, more deaths, more funerals, more parents like me, you know, angry about everything that's happened when it didn't have to be this way. So who will answer for this? Who will answer for all the parents and citizens killed by guns and those injured by them? Who's going to answer that? Will it be the Supreme Court, the 7th Circuit, or the gun manufacturers? Can someone answer that, or is everybody a coward and they just want to put a gun in our communities?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Bosley. I'm the father of Terrell Bosley, gospel musician who was shot and killed in April 2006 as he was coming out of church. And I, too, to piggyback on what Annette said, believe that more guns is not the answer. I think what you're going to have is you're going to have more individuals taking the law into their own hands. You're going to have legal guns in the home, and you're going to have people who have domestic disputes use those guns on each other, where before they didn't have access to them. And then what about the kids? You're going to have kids who somehow get access to their parents' legal gun, and if they don't shoot themselves, they'll probably accidentally shoot a sibling or use that gun to settle a dispute out in the street. I think these are the things that the Supreme Court has not taken into account in our communities. And I just don't believe that the guns are the answer. And then what about the police officers who have to respond to these domestic disputes? And the husband has the gun in his hand, a legal gun in his hand. What does the police officer do? We're setting ourselves up for more lawsuits and just more loss of life. So in my opinion, I just don't think the Supreme Court has addressed some of the things that are going to happen in our communities in results to having just more guns on the street. more guns in my home would not have saved my son's life, but having more guns off the street may have saved his life.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Sarita Villarreal. I am sister of Antonio Marquez, who was killed October 16th of 2002 as he stopped to help a homeless person, and his pregnant wife witnessed this. It happened in a borderline of Pilsen and Little Village. In regards to guns, I'm only going to say something very short. Guns are made for one thing, is to kill. We're not talking about recreational guns to go hunting. We're talking about guns in the city of Chicago, a city where there is no wilderness to go hunting, a city where there is no animals to kill, but other people. So to have a gun in your hand is only for one thing, and that's to shoot, and that's to kill. Thank you.
Questions, anyone?
So, Mr. Mayor, what do you think of these gun rights groups who say already whatever you propose, they're going to go to court and change?
Well, we are a country of laws, and the court rendered a decision. We will look at the decision. We're not a country of guns. We did away with that as we landed here, and we made laws, and we hired sheriffs and marshals and went through lawlessness in our society. We are not a nation of guns. We're a nation of laws. I think we have to understand this is a very, very complicated matter. If the sales of guns and ammunition are $10 billion in America, and we're supposed to lead the world in how society, American democracy, is supposed to act, they look at us and question us. And it's very disappointing. But again, you respect the law, and then in turn, you figure out the decision, and you move forward and make recommendations how we can truly protect society. Now, I don't think more guns protect society. I just don't believe it. I just don't believe it.
Could you give a little detail possibly about what you're looking at?
Well, again, the thing that bothers us is first responders go into a home and a person has a right to a gun. Does that person have a right to a gun to just have it in his hand at all times in the house? If you respond to domestic violence, burglary in progress, shots fired, do you, as a first responder, what do you do? I put it on the first responders, what do they do when they come to a home or apartment? That is a concern because everybody wants to sue the city. Everyone wants to sue the government and get money. And if that individual makes a decision and he sees a man with a gun and he takes a gun and he shoots him, that's going to be liability for the city. And we have to, how do you place the first responders, paramedics, fire officials, and police who are responding to 911 calls? And you cannot just divide the city. Say, okay, in that area they're going to have guns. We're going to do a separation. You're going to have a lot of guns there. That is very powerful language to say those communities, they need the guns. You know, if you look at statistics across, there have been killings all over in schools, in the suburban area. There's been killings in all types of places in America. Not just the black and Hispanic community, but the entire nation. And also, we're brothers and sisters. We're not separate people. We may look different. We may have different color, but we're not different. We are not different. We all want the same thing for our children. If you have a child that died, of illness, I miss them even today. The people behind me, they had their child taken from them because of violence, gun violence. And that's why they're so emotional about this issue.
Mayor, you use the word liability. Are you suggesting that the to-be announced Chicago regulations should include some kind of insurance?
Well, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know. We're looking at a lot of things. We're trying to.
Is that a possibility?
Well, it's a possibility. We're trying to figure out how do you protect. Everybody wants to sue the city. You know that, for everything. They think we got deep pockets. But how do you protect the first responder? How do you protect the policeman have to make that decision? People will be outraged if he or she uses that gun in that home, because that person has the right to a gun in his home. Does he have a right to point a gun at his child? He's the parent. Does he have a right to point a gun at his spouse? Does he? Those are valid questions to ask. What does the first responder, paramedic, do? What does a police officer do? And those are valid questions to ask.
Mr. Mayor, do I understand correctly that even though the law has not been struck down, the police department is no longer going to enforce it as of this moment?
Mara will enforce that.
Technically, our handgun ban has not been invalidated by this opinion, so our handgun ban remains in place. Until the Seventh Circuit rules. There is a very limited right recognized here for a handgun in the home for self-defense purposes. Our ordinance stands. Our ordinance will be enforced. Our ordinance remains as it is until the Seventh Circuit tells us otherwise, or we initiate a new ordinance.
But people are still going to be arrested and charged, even today.
What happens
with an ordinance that you know is going to go down the street?
Well, there are several questions being asked. We have certainly been put on notice by the Supreme Court that there is a right to a handgun in the home for self-defense purposes. So I would argue that if someone were to have a handgun in his or her home for self-defense purposes, they have a right to do that. But certainly, even in his plurality opinion, Justice Alito said that the right to possess a handgun in the home is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. We can do reasonable regulation. We can have registration requirements. We can have obligations that firearm owners have to meet. And we will do that in our new ordinance. Currently, there is not a mechanism for registering a handgun within the city of Chicago. As I said in my talking points, however, we will have such a mechanism in place very soon, and I urge people to wait until that mechanism is in place so that they can follow all applicable laws before they possess a handgun.
Can you tell us about the number of arrests that have been made regarding the ban or violations?
I don't have numbers with me. The superintendent can speak to that.
We take the state ordinance.
We make arrests every day in terms of unlawful use of a weapon. We use both federal statutes and state statutes. So people should not immediately think that now they can walk around the streets of Chicago with a weapon. That is not the case. You know, we will address this through a new ordinance, as Mara mentioned, but we arrest people every day.
When was the last time you arrested someone based on the handgun ban, as you call it?
I don't have that information for you.
We just increased. We increased the charge on lawful use of a weapon, possession of a state charge.
You have to understand, when a crime has been committed, the prosecutor in his or her discretion will look at all the charges that can be leveled against an individual.
And that's what we did for years. We just increased the state charges on anybody
So
dealing with
typically
guns.
the charge that will be charged is the federal charge or the state charge, which carries much more significant penalties than a city violation.
That's what you did all the time.
Are we talking about days or weeks to have these new regulations?
Well, we don't know until well, we've been working on them, you know, since the decision came down in the D.C. case, and we've been working on those. Pardon me?
Has the city council seen the proposed ordinance?
We've been talking to them. They had public hearings about 2 weeks ago on a Friday.
I was there.
Yes.
How long will they have to see the actual ordinance before they have
Well,
to
we'll
vote
be
on it?
talking to them this week again. We talked to a number of last week.
Alderman Beal recess comes tomorrow at 1. He says he expects to pass the ordinance tomorrow. Is that right?
Well, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. We have to figure that out. We can always call a special session.
Justice Alito, in his opinion, made reference to the call by Ritchie and another state rep to bring the National Guard into the city of Chicago. We all know where that went. But in that same page, they made reference to the minority community and the fact that some people in the minority community maybe want guns in their homes for self-protection because of crime issues in the city. Do you think that that's an inaccurate perception?
Well, I don't think just that. The perception maybe across the country, not just in the African American community or Hispanic, all communities, yes, if they feel that way. But just to designate only the black community is very powerful language they use in the Hispanic community. They're pretty powerful unless they've done a study on it.
But Mayor, with all due respect to your arguments, how do you get around the Second Amendment legally?
Well, I don't think America should be noted for, we could kill more people in America than any other nation. We love to kill. We can kill overseas. We export more guns than anybody else. And we buy more guns than anybody else, ammunition. That should not be known as a great country. And we should not be that. You take other civilized society, industrialized society, they don't have as many people killed and injured on a daily basis. And not just in Chicago, in your own backyards. It's happening all over in America.
We need to wind down.
Argument, your side espouses in this, it's kind of losing ground nationally. Your own party nationally won't push much of anything in Congress.
All right, yeah.
Is worried about the NRA. How do you change this?
Well, I've said that the National Rifle Association manufacturers are the strongest lobbyists, even stronger than the media. They are stronger. They're stronger than Obama, Daily is stronger than Fox, CBS, NBC, ABC, all of them put together. They can't be sued. They are the power of America. They are. That's real. Never giving up to them and thinking about if your son or daughter got killed, you would be right behind me right now or in front of me. That's where you would be. I think, and that's what it is. I mean, respect people. The manufacturers have a lot of money. $10 billion worth of sale. Guns and ammunition is pretty powerful. And they give a lot of money to politicians.
Is that
So
why
what?
you said that you were not surprised? Do you think that had a direct impact, the money and power of the industry, on Supreme Court justices?
No, I didn't say that. I never said that.
When
No,
were
no.
you...
No, they were asking me. He was asking me a political question dealing with the politics of the Democrat and Republican Party. It had nothing to do with the Supreme Court.
Are you worried that people are going to rush out today and buy guns because the Supreme Court says it's okay to have it in your house?
Well, I hope not, but remember, $10 billion worth of sales is bigger than all your sales combined in the media. This is a big industry, and it's tough to tackle. You think BP is tough to tackle? This industry is tough to tackle, but people who lost loved ones or purpose over pain, and others are willing to stand up to it, and they're not afraid.
Mayor, what do you think this means about, is there a possibility or potential for guns to be sold within the city of Chicago, particularly in gun stores?
Again, we will wait to the Seventh Court runs their opinion as well. Thank you.
How do you balance then this, the law-abiding citizen who does follow the rules and you're going to put in these restrictions? The law-abiding citizen isn't the one who has killed these folks.
No, but law-abiding citizens have killed people. Guns have killed people, innocent people. How many stories have you written about a child playing with that gun? How much child running and grabbing that gun and running out of the house? Chicago policemen lock their guns. They disarm their guns. That's what they do when they're at home. Very dangerous to have a gun at home.
Can you understand how people might feel safer keeping a
No,
gun at home?
well, sure, you understand that. Everybody understands that. But again, America should not be known, with all the money you spend with the federal government and state government and local government law enforcement, huge amount of money. The answer now is guns. It's not law enforcement. It's not good laws. Now it's guns. And I disagree with that philosophy. I don't think guns will accomplish more. Guns in society doesn't accomplish more for society.
Thank you.
More violence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Now to the major ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court today. It effectively struck down Chicago's 28-year-old ban on handguns. In doing so, the court affirmed the right of individuals to keep guns for self-protection.
The lead plaintiff in the case was 76-year-old Morgan Park resident Otis McDonald. He believes the court's decision validates his right to protect himself.
It means that I can feel that a lot of people in the world will have an equal chance of defending themselves against drug dealers and gangbangers across the United States.
The ruling was expected, but Mayor Daley didn't hide his disappointment.
Well, I don't think America should be noted for, we could kill more people in America than any other nation. We love to kill.
You got shots fired over here.
Even though the gun ban doesn't seem to have had a notable effect on gun violence in its nearly 30 years, the mayor worries about the effect the ruling will have.
Common sense tells you we need fewer guns on the street, not more guns.
2 years ago, the Supreme Court handed down a similar ruling that applied only to federal laws. Today's decision extends that judgment, applying it to state and local government laws. Justice Samuel Alito wrote that self-defense is a basic right.
I have a right to protect myself. I have a right to own a firearm to do that. That's at the very core of our American consciousness.
The court decision sent the Chicago case back to a lower court, but there's not much doubt how that court will rule.
Under the Supreme Court's decision, the outright ban is not reasonable and therefore will be held unconstitutional on remand to the Seventh Circuit.
The 4 dissenting justices insisted that individuals only have a right to bear arms as part of what the Constitution calls a well-regulated militia.